Hi, I'm Radical Liberation, self-declared King of the Moon, with my wife, Heather,
Hi.
Queen of the Moon, and we are coming at you from St. Louis, Missouri, United States, and we're going to get right into it. My wife thought of one more thing we should have mentioned really in part one, which ended up addressing kind of why to homeschool and objections that people have. And we discussed the biggest one, I think, the main one people come up with, which is, will your kids be socialized? And we addressed that last time. So go see that first video, which is shared in the description. You can see part one in the description of this video, which you shouldn't skip. Anyway, we addressed socialization, but there's another one that people bring up, maybe after a socialization is addressed, which is, but I just don't have the patience.
Right.
For that.
Right.
So yeah, your thoughts on that, Heather?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. Just being out and about, whether I was at the grocery store or at the park, and I would encounter other moms with their children, and they, of course, I get comments because we have so many children, and of course that leads to a question I'm often asked, which is, do you homeschool? Yes, I do. And then they usually say, well, I just wouldn't have the patience for that. And I guess my initial thought is that, we don't learn patience by avoiding situations that require it. And there's seems to be this idea that, we're just each one of us is just a certain way, as though we're just born with a certain amount of patience, and this is not a skill or a discipline or a virtue, that can be developed and acquired. So I guess I just say I don't think that's an adequate objection to homeschooling your children, or choosing not to homeschool your children. And if that's your main objection, that you're not patient enough, then I think that homeschooling your children can be a wonderful opportunity for personal growth.
Right.
So.
And I've found it very helpful, I think, when you share your own experience, which is that people are like, wow, 8 children, how could you ever do that? And you always say, actually, the hardest transition was not going to, 5 children to 6 children, 6
Right.
children to 8, jumping
Right.
to 8 with twins. It was 0 children to 1 child.
Oh, yeah.
And why is that?
Wow. I mean, it was kind of a shock to my system. I think one of the things I've said to you is, I didn't realize just how selfish I was until I suddenly had another human being completely dependent upon me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and once that initial shock, once I accepted the new reality, then it was really not that much more work to add
Additional children.
Well, yeah, 3
Right.
was hard because,
Right.
you
We
know,
had
you
them
get used to,
quickly.
we had them quickly, and you have to get used to being outnumbered, but adding
Right.
4, 5, and 6, and even the twins. I was a seasoned mother by the time the
Right.
twins came along, and it was hard. There were things that were challenging about it, but it wouldn't, if that had been my first.
That would have been much bigger. Yeah. The other
You
thing
know.
I remember you say is just that before having had a child, you realize that you never thought about anything else before that. But what do I feel like doing right this moment
What
for
am
me?
I going to eat for breakfast?
Yeah, right.
I guess I'll take a shower. the
And
things
so
that you take for granted.
That's what this huge paradigm shift was, to not be able to think about yourself first,
Mm-hmm.
but to have to think about, here's this new baby that's entirely dependent on me.
Right.
And if they need something, then, I might just need to hold it or whatever. And,
Yeah.
and I might
Yeah.
need to put my needs aside and take care of them first.
Right.
And so that was a huge shift for you.
It was. It
Right.
really was.
But I think the other thing just on this issue of patience is that, and we hear the same thing from artists who get frustrated, musicians and artists who get frustrated when people say, well, you're just so talented, I could never be
Mhm.
that way. And the
Mhm.
artist is like, yeah, I worked really, really hard to get to where I am.
Right.
So along similar lines,
Mhm.
when people say, well, you must have just been blessed with patience. Well, no, this is something
No.
you developed.
Yes. Yes.
through fire,
Yeah.
the fire of
Yes.
having children and having them
Yeah.
dependent on you and just having to deal with all the feelings that came up.
Right.
And, right?
Right. Yeah.
Very personally challenging.
Yes. Yes. And homeschooling, adds to that challenge. I don't get to get away from my kids. I've
Yeah.
heard moms, I mean, you mentioned last time, that there were moms who sort of were forced into working outside the home. That's not what they really wanted. But I've also heard moms say, I love going to work. I can't wait to go and there's no noise. I get to
Right.
focus. I get to concentrate.
Right. Talk to adults.
Talk to adults. I get to have my coffee. I mean, it can feel like a real luxury after they've been at home for a while. So, I've heard both sides of it. So,
Right.
but anyway, if you are concerned that your lack of patience is off-putting, this is an opportunity to remedy that.
Right. And in a way, when people say, "Oh, I just don't have the patience for that," I mean, really, what the conversation needs to be is homeschooling your children will change you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
That is true,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a bad change.
No.
It's a good change.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Our character is formed by challenges.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, just a loose end to tie up from our discussion of why to homeschool, objections to homeschooling. But today, really, the main focus is to talk about. Sorry, that's distracting. The main focus is to talk about the nitty gritty. So you've decided to homeschool.
Yeah.
What next?
Right.
Okay. So the very first thing to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and boy, do we love to talk about this as libertarian anarchists, the government. Unfortunately, that's where we got to start, just to be practical and honest. And that is what is required for your state or whatever government you're under. I'll just skip to the worst case, which is that if you're in Germany, you should just leave because they'll jail you.
Right.
Because of Nazi era laws that are still in effect and that they actually will prosecute you for. So that is a real bummer. But outside of Germany, I don't know if I've heard of anybody else that's quite that harsh. Outside of Germany, the restrictions vary all over the place, from basically you can do whatever you want to pretty rigorous reporting and compliance standards.
Right. Absolutely.
But we know the United States, so let's just show you what it's like to give you a feel.
So Homeschool Legal Defense has a great visual and on their website. So I think Stephen's going to pull that up.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can essentially.
First of all, let me show the organization because we wanted to mention this. Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA, is just an absolutely essential resource for homeschoolers in the United States. And in fact, I think they helped with a German family that was fleeing Germany. And they help, we found out, with families that are needing help.
They actually have a very special program for single moms who want to homeschool.
Right.
To support them financially and help them get the resources they need in order to make that happen.
Yeah, so it's a great organization to know about for multiple reasons, and a good sort of insurance policy to be a member of it in case you have any trouble. They're going to be on your side to help you out. Absolutely. And you won't just feel like the whole state versus me, Having said that, great resource. Oh, by the way, I have linked most of the resources we're going to mention today, curriculum and this very page we're looking at right now. This is all in the show description. I just added it right before the show, so you might need to refresh. Awesome. But if you look at the show description, you'll see links to a lot of the things we're going to mention, most of them. Now, this is a map where you can click on your state. Before you do that, though, there's colors here. What do they mean? So the darkest means the darkest is the best. The dark blue, the navy, means no notice required. What does that mean? You can just jump in and homeschool. Yeah, that means you don't have to give the government any notice that you're doing this. I didn't get anyone's permission. When our children came of age, I just started schooling them. Right. So as far as we know, the school system in our area literally doesn't know our children exist.
That's correct.
So we are just completely disconnected from them. They're not checking on us. They're not asking for reports from us, so on and so forth. Now, we do have some light requirements we try to keep up with just in case someone were to come along and question what we're up to show that we're in compliance with what the state expects of us,
Right.
Which we'll be getting into that in detail. But basically, Missouri, where we are, is pretty low compliance. And you can see that's true of about a half dozen other states, Texas and so
Right.
forth.
Right.
Then you get to low regulation in the light blue, moderate regulation in the light purple. And in the dark purple, you have the high regulation, of course, up in the Yankee states.
Up in the Northeast.
Up in the Northeast here, New York State,
Right.
Pennsylvania, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island are going to be the worst. No surprise if you know anything about where authoritarianism tends to come from in this country. It tends to come from up here. It just so happens. Well, it doesn't just so happen. There's deep reasons for it, which I can tell you about. But anyway, so that's where it's going to be the worst. And what, maybe you've picked up on it, give us a picture of what high regulation, like what's the worst case?
Gosh.
What might that look like?
Yeah. So some states require standardized testing every year. You know, so your child will have to, you know, take a test. And if they don't pass the test, then there's going to be problems, you know. But, I mean, you know, I've never lived in a state with those kinds of regulations. And so, you know, I only know our state's regulations, and we live in Missouri. So essentially, we don't have to give notice that we're going to homeschool. If your child was enrolled in school and you have the intention to homeschool and you want to pull your child out of school, I think, and again, this, you can just poke around on this website and it'll tell you, but I think all you have to do is write a letter of intent and then you can just pull them out. But please do, you know, use this website to double check that.
Yep.
And then for Missouri, we're required to engage in 1,000 hours.
Well, wait, if we're
You wanna
getting
wait
into
on that?
Missouri,
Yeah,
let's
let's
click.
click
So
on the state.
Now, having understood the colors here and a rough idea of what that means, let's click on our own state just to give you an example.
Yeah, a little
And
tutorial
here's
here.
laws at a glance.
Right.
I feel like they're not getting into the details you're already mentioning.
Right.
But okay, go ahead and cover
okay,
what they have
yeah.
here.
All right. So you don't have to start schooling your child until age 7. Okay. 7 to 17 are the required years. And honestly, starting at age 7 goes right along with classical education. You know, they really recommend waiting until later to start anything. And most of my kids, in my experience, really haven't been ready to do any of that sitting down and doing book work and things like that until that age anyway.
Yeah,
so
we're going to talk a little bit later about, it might be a little bit of a shocking idea that you would not do anything formal with your children at age 5 because we're used to the idea of kindergarten.
Right.
But we're going to get into practical reasons why that is a little bit later in detail. But anyway, in our state, 7.
7, right.
Yeah.
You don't have to give notification. You don't need to have a teacher's degree. You don't need qualifications.
Oh, yeah. Some of the high regulation states are going to require you to.
Yeah. I mean, I actually don't know. I mean,
Okay,
we can poke around.
Yeah.
State mandated subjects. So Missouri does have subjects that we have to teach. There are 5 subjects that you have to cover: reading, math, social studies or history, language arts. What am I forgetting? Science. Is that it? Reading, math, language arts, social studies, and science. That's 5.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to cover those subjects, and then there's no assessment. You know, we don't have to take state mandated examinations, which is great. Right. And then immunization requirements, there are none. You know, they're not forcing us to be vaccinated and things like that.
So here's a little bit more detail. We won't go through all this. You must provide your child with at least 1,000 hours of instruction every school term. Now that sounds forbidding, but, and we'll cover this in more detail later, that is not just sitting there doing classwork for 1,000 hours.
No, I mean, if I did the math real quick. If you engage in if your children are engaged in some kind of learning, approximately 5 hours a day, they could be just reading their own book. They could be watching a documentary. They could be helping you cook, you know, times 5 days a week. It's about 40 weeks of school. We tend to save up a lot of, we have to do, of that 1,000, 600 need to be actually in the place where you're learning, and 400 are supposed to be somewhere else. Now, before COVID, we would go to the library every other week. We would always be checking out books. And then we always do quite a number of field trips in the summer, where we're doing all day long kind of field trips, geology field trips and things.
Right.
Anyway.
So what it says here is that 600 out of the 1,000 must be core subjects. So
Right.
that's 600 hours really is your number for like the formal learning. But even that, as you mentioned, could be watching a documentary. That could count, right? So what about those other 400? Those can be, and in fact, they want you.
Yeah.
They want them to be. They want you to do outings and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I don't remember very many field trips. Like, it was so exciting and weird when we did a field trip.
Right.
Whereas field
everybody's
trips,
piling on the bus, and
as we'll discuss, field trips, at least the way we do things, are a much more typical part of how we're doing things. So
Yes.
it's a lot less sitting at a desk than I remember when I was in school. So let me just read what the HSLDA says. Now, remember, this is in a light requirement state. They still say HSLDA strongly recommends you keep a daily log showing the hours of instruction you give your children every day. Although it's not technically required, it's the very best way to prove you really provided each child with 1,000 hours of instruction. So that sounds like a little bit of a pain. Having said that, you just have to be in the habit.
Yeah.
Right. And then if anyone ever questions you and says, you're not really schooling your kids, you're just screwing around, you pull your log out and you're now are in a very, very strong position.
Absolutely.
Right? And this is holding your log right now.
Let me see the camera so I can say that I'm
Make sure.
holding this up.
Let me take this off the screen. Okay.
So I just went to a teacher's store and I bought a teacher planner. And this is an old one. This is from, I don't know what year this is. 2018 or something. And basically I wrote in my subject. Oh, the lighting is really terrible.
Just hold it up. It'll adjust.
Okay. So I wrote in my subjects, and then I have the days of the week. And then I also denote, I just put like the first initial of our kids. So Jay did these math pages, and, anytime we go to a park day, as far, with the homeschool group, that counts. Any extracurricular karate, art classes, all that gets recorded in here.
Right.
And so I make sure that there is a record of everything we did on every single day. And if I were to be called account, I could just pull this out and go, well, here's my log, to make sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing.
Right. So what I'm trying to get to, and we'll be going through our day and what the homeschool day looks like here in more detail shortly. But what I'm trying to get to here is, don't think, oh my goodness, I got to do what they do at the government school, and my kids are going to be sitting at a desk for 7 hours.
Right.
That's not what they're requiring. It's not a good idea to do that, and it's not what we do, and in part because many things count towards those hours besides sitting at a desk working on a workbook.
Fun
There's
phrase.
a lot of things.
I remember when I was first homeschooling, and I was like, well, what if our kids are doing this? And I remember this mom leaning into me and going, Heather, it all counts.
It all counts.
Just count anything that can be something that they would have been doing in school. It counts. Okay. So it all counts. So if we're learning to do some cooking, and honestly, fractions always come up during cooking, because of course with a big family, I have to double and sometimes even triple recipes. And so we end up adding fractions,
right?
So there's always an opportunity for, learning, even if you're doing household stuff.
Okay. And then I think that's all we're going to get into here. We already talked about keeping records and anyway, there's more details for your particular state if you're in the United States at the website. Yeah. And we'd encourage you to look at that.
Yeah, it's a good resource.
So did we cover all this? Oh, yeah. So I forgot
to follow up on that story to get the details. The thing.
Yeah, but you can tell what you know, right? Yeah. Which is, we just wanted to share a quick story well, go ahead.
Yeah. So, this past year, a lot of people were forced into doing public school style work in the home. And this, they found this to be fairly burdensome, and it is, so I was talking to one homeschool mom who was basically like, I'm ready to pull my kid out of school. And the school started to say, well, you can't do that. We have to basically continue to stay connected to your child and all this stuff. So, I think it's really important to know your rights so that you can advocate for yourself and your child, to know that we don't have to legally give notice to anyone to homeschool our children in the state of Missouri. So you can say that to the administrator who's basically trying to keep you hooked in to the school. No, I don't have to do that.
Right.
So I just think it's really important, because I think people in authority in the school, it can feel scary when you don't know what's going on,
they're going to take, it's particularly scary. I don't know what it's like in all the other countries, but in the United States, we have situations where children are taken away from families for reasons that, I don't know the details of these cases, but you read about it in the news and you're like, that sounds like they just grabbed those people's kids for no good reason,
Right.
And that's really frightening. And so when somebody starts talking about you're not doing the right thing with your kids, you can start to feel a little bit intimidated, in our country at least. So I think that's why this was story. Part of the reason the story is so important. They don't understand what the laws are sometimes, and they'll speak as if with authority, but you go to HSLDA, look it up, and you can find out what the truth is, come back to them and say, no, actually, I'm in the state of Missouri, the rules are such and such, and we are complying with those rules.
Right. Now, also on the Homeschool Legal Defense Association's website, if you're in a state that does require you to write a letter of intent or something like that to pull your child out of school, they have templates for that you can actually print out, and they have all that information for you to walk you through the process of pulling your child out of school. You don't have to do that by yourself. You don't have to come up with this on your own. They've got your back. They'll walk you through the whole process. So very good.
Okay, so that's all that. Right. So having figured out the legalities of your situation and determining that you can homeschool your children and what you'd have to do to keep the government happy, what's the next question?
Okay, well, I think it's really important to ask yourself, what is your goal? What do you want to accomplish with schooling your children? For some people, unschooling is their thing. They just want to be able to give their child the freedom to pursue whatever subject they want at whatever time, with the caveat that if they want to learn science, they're most likely going to need to know how to read. And so basically, the child's curiosity becomes the catalyst for their needing to learn certain things. And I think that works for some families and some children, So for us, I explained in our first talk what our goal was, that I kind of went through this process of figuring out, why I wanted to homeschool and et cetera. So for our goal was really that I wanted them to have a good education. I wanted to give them a very good foundation, but mostly I wanted for them to have the tools for learning, so that they could take those tools and then go off and gain mastery in areas that, maybe they had a certain giftedness in a certain area, and to be able to take the time to do that. And so that I can see being lived out in our kids. It's pretty exciting to see. So, figure out what your goal is. What do you want to accomplish? Maybe you just want to pull your kid out of school because they're being bullied horrendously and you want them to not be abused, You
want them to be safe. Yeah, just quick rabbit hole. I wrote an article, I think I shared it last time, in response to a horrible school shooting that happened a long time ago. Of course, we've had many more since then. And I've often marveled at how, if there were school shootings happening on the regularity that we hear about them in government schools, in like a for-profit company school, the media would have everyone freaked out and everyone would be pulling their kids out of it, right?
Right.
Well, these school shootings, horrible school shootings, happen in government schools, and people keep sending their kids there. I don't exactly understand the logic of that. Yeah. I find it kind of shocking. Also, we thought of the verse from Proverbs, where there is no vision, the people perish.
Yeah.
You need to, and that's what Heather's really wanting to emphasize here. You need to go ahead. before you get into the nuts and bolts, you need to step back, think on a bigger level of what is my vision?
Right.
What is my vision for schooling my children? Why am I doing this?
Right.
What are my sort of high level vision goals, right?
Yeah.
So you said your goals were teach the children the tools of learning,
right,
give them the freedom to pursue their own interests, not
Yeah.
exactly, well, okay. Tools of learning is sort of first, right? You wanted them to have the tools of learning with the tools of learning in place, which is a little slightly different, I think, from unschooling maybe, though we're not unschoolers, so we can't totally speak to that. With the tools of learning in place, then, and as they get older, give them the freedom to pursue their own interests. That is, there's time for them to go deep
and I wanted to
on
give
something they care about. And finally, you didn't want them chained to a desk all day. You
Absolutely
you did not like the experience you and I had in government school, which is you're 5 or 6, well, maybe not 5, but 6, and you are sitting for hours and hours and hours, which is not so hard for little girls generally, but can be really rough for little boys depending on their temperament. We have our youngest son who really struggles to sit still.
He does.
And he's 7 now, and he still really, really struggles to sit still because he's bursting with testosterone. He's like,
or something. He's just a Mack truck.
He's testosterone level
he's very
9,000 or something.
So I just wanted to give an example of the kind of mastery. Just to boast on one of our kids real quick. Can you pull that up?
We don't want to do that way.
So our second born has discovered that she enjoys painting, and she's discovered that she has the ability.
Don't be distracted.
I am getting distracted by it. We just got quail on our farm.
Quail chicks.
Quail, they're so cute. They're so little. Anyway, getting distracted by the cuteness of the babies. But anyway, so, she discovered that not only does she enjoy painting, but she's actually becoming quite good at it. And so she did a portrait recently, and Stephen's going to show you an example. She just turned 15, and my goodness, she's gaining some mastery here. So, we're looking toward having her taking art classes at the college next year.
Yeah, so she turned 15 in September. So she'd be not quite 15 and a half. And she is already painting at this level, which we think is pretty good.
It's amazing.
And so, we're quickly, at age 15, we're quickly getting to the point where we're having to scramble to figure out who's in a position to teach her stuff she hasn't already learned or figured out on her own.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting challenge, right?
Yeah.
This is a good problem, as my dad would say. It's a good problem to be feeling challenged as to how to support your child taking things to the next level, because they've chosen to go deep on something.
Right.
They've figured out a lot. They've been spending hours on it, right? Our children who get interested, we see this with our teens, they get interested in something. We don't tell them to do it. They just start doing every day. They start working.
Right.
So our daughter who painted this works on her painting pretty much every weekday. At least,
she's so articulate. And what she said to me recently, she said, because she can also sing and has been teaching herself to play the ukulele, and she's getting some proficiency. And I said, maybe you could come and sing with me or something. And she said, no. Playing the ukulele and singing is just fun. It's an outlet for me. It's something I really enjoy. And she said, I have gotten into the habit of practicing every day, but with painting, I'm willing to push through the discomfort in order for it to be more of a discipline for me. I'm willing. I mean, can you imagine thinking that way and doing that at age 15?
15 or younger.
She's willing to put in the time and to feel uncomfortable, but to keep pushing through it so that she can finish something, so that she can get these kinds of results.
So she is making a distinction between something that's fun and the pursuit of mastery. Right. And what we're seeing here is a 15-year-old who is working towards mastery of painting. Yes. I mean, it's amazing.
And it's neat to be able to see that, here's now here, I started homeschooling 12 years ago, and now I'm seeing the fruits already, of just providing the tools for learning and the opportunity to for them to think, to discover who they are, what they're good at, And I mean, my gosh, I mean, look at this. So it's amazing. So
wait, what did he say? Mickey, who was guest on my economics show just a few days ago, says she's only 15 and she painted this.
I know.
Yeah, that's how we're feeling.
I know.
we show people at like artists and art teachers, and they're like, okay, how are we going to find a way to teach this young lady?
I know. So anyway.
So what did we just cover? Yeah, freedom to pursue their own interests, not chained to a desk all day. That I'm glad you thought to show them that work by Madeline, because this really illustrates why it was so exciting for me, because I was able to go deep on things. The way I did it, though, was by fitting it in while still going to government schooling. Right. So I was literally reading books that were inside the textbook. I had another book inside there. And while, everything, all the chaos during class, right, I would be getting some other reading done, Right. So I'm like reading about mass murder by the state at 14 while kids are goofing off in freshman math or something, Right. And then I would just stay up late. I just didn't get enough sleep,
Right.
So I did that sort of thing. So to me, the thought of offering to my children the opportunity I didn't have, which was to have that passion like I had in my case for scholarship, right? To have some passion, whatever it is, in our daughter's case, painting, and have the time to do it. And not just the time, which is so huge, but also, of course, we support them, right?
Right.
We have our daughter going to an art class, the painting we just showed you.
Right.
We have that daughter going to an art class. The teacher can't really teach her much, but she enjoys the company.
I'm not sure how fair that is.
Okay. Well, anyway, she enjoys the company.
The teacher said, I'm going to have to figure out what to do with you.
Yeah.
Because when you have someone who's already achieved that skill level, along with other kids who are just taking this class because they think it might be fun.
Yeah, right.
That's really challenging for a teacher.
Different kind of.
I think that's really challenging for a teacher.
Right.
So
anyway, okay.
So now you decided to homeschool. You know what your state's laws are. How do you do this day to day? How does?
Well, I think the way we put it in the notes is great. How do you school your children so that you meet the requirements you need to meet legally?
Right.
And you meet your goals.
And you meet your goals.
Now, we can't tell you how to do that, but I think the emphasis, I love the notes we prepared here, because the emphasis here is that Heather is going to tell you what we do, not because that's exactly what you should do, but just so you see one solution to meeting government requirements, meeting our goals, and you see how we did it.
Right.
And hopefully that can get you started thinking creatively how you can do the same thing with your children, your goals, and your government requirements.
Right.
Right. How to bring all that together in an actual day-to-day plan. Right. So where we're starting actually is when the children are young, and by young, think like they're not ready for formal schooling yet.
Right. Right.
We don't want them sitting they're not ready.
Yeah, they're not ready to sit and write.
Write and stuff like that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So what do you do with your 5-year-olds and your 4-year-olds and your 6-year-olds?
Right. Well, our first 3 children were born in 2 years and 8 months. So I had a 2.5-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a newborn. And then 2 years after that, our 4th child was born.
Right.
So I would gather up my little homeschool preschool and we would just go everywhere. I mean, we went to the zoo, once and twice a week. We did the butterfly house. We went to the gardens. We went to the library almost every week. I got to know my librarians and we would just go and hang out. I also was a part of a mom's group, that was, it was called Nursing and Nurturing. And it was focused on attachment parenting, discussing attachment parenting and supporting women as they're nursing, not just infants, but as their child was getting older. And so we would go, and that would end up being a play date for the kids as well. Once they started showing interest in doing any formal learning, and I really didn't do any real formal learning until our oldest was probably 6 or 7, then it's occupying the younger kids with maybe Play-Doh or something sensory. Maybe they want to scribble with crayons on paper while I take maybe 15 minutes to do a little lesson on phonics, or, let's work on writing our letters or things like that, and I I would record anything that we did. If we watched something on a documentary, science related, if we went to the zoo, that counts as science,
Right.
And so then I started to log, what we were doing and sort of get the hang of that. Now, when our kids were young, I was still kind of in that detox process. And I was like wringing my hands a little bit still.
When our first children.
Right. I was wringing my hands a little bit still about, oh gosh, what if I don't teach the right things? And what if they miss something? And, I hadn't gotten to the relaxed state of mind of, if we miss something, we'll just go back and teach it.
Yeah, right.
For some reason that hadn't occurred to me yet. So lots of getting out of the house, lots of, little kids like tactile kinds of things. They learn through play. I am really into gardening. And so every spring we would do the gardening together. We would plant seeds. Then they would see the seeds coming up and we would talk about, how is this happening? What is exactly happening when a seed produces a plant, and so that counted as science, so there's just there's so much interconnection between subjects and being able to have lots and lots of discussions about these things. But I would say get outside. Do not confine your schooling to inside your house. You just go to your backyard and be outside.
I want to use the zoo. I mean, we'll see this theme, but let's start talking about it. We'll see this theme throughout, but let's start talking about it, which is, I think one of the things I got out of the school system was this sharp divide. You are doing schooling.
Right.
Or you're screwing around, know, you're not learning anything. And what I see with you is that the lines are extremely fuzzy, and it might look like play,
right?
But it's actually not only counting as, but really is learning. So
absolutely.
Let me pick an example and tell me about it. When you take them to the zoo,
right?
Sure, you're able to technically count it as science, but do you do more than just having them pet fuzzy rabbits, or what do you?
Well, I mean, if they had questions about things, I would say, well, let's go ask the zookeeper. There's one right there.
I remember being with you and doing that. Yeah.
Let's go ask about that.
We'd be very bold to
why not?
Take advantage of.
I mean, who doesn't like to talk about the subject that they're an expert in?
Right.
So we would just go ask the zookeeper, and I would always really take time. I would start to see, okay, their attention span is up. I would sort of gauge it, and of course I usually had a nursing baby with me. And so the baby would be in a stroller and the sling, and, I'd keep the outings to about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then we're out of there, go home. And
we mentioned this last time, but let me just mention again, I like to pick on the government because I'm an anarchist, but let me be fair. What we have found is that homeschooling's been around for a while in this country. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what we've found is that we go to the zoo, we go to the library. These are all public institutions, government institutions, right? And other places. And they're real supportive.
Oh, yeah.
They feel like they are there, at the zoo, they're there to teach you about animals and kind of science and stuff. And so they're not like, oh, homeschooled family, I'm going to be rude to them. No, they're eager to, there's people here who want to learn the things that I have to teach. I want to talk to them. And at the library, the librarians are like, you became friends with some of them, right? They want to, you explain, I don't exactly know what I need. It's something like this. Oh, I've got the thing for you. Yeah. So don't be shy about just asking for help, even from government entities.
Yeah, I'll give a perfect example
will help
of that.
you.
I'll give a perfect example of that. Missouri Department of Conservation has tons of curriculum.
Yeah.
Okay. If you sign up for one of their little classes, you'll get to go on a big hike. And then, I mean, I have, we get free Missouri Conservationists for free.
Yeah.
Magazine. We get Explore, which is a kid's version of that. And they talk about what the animals are doing in wintertime.
Fabulous photography.
Oh, beautiful photography. Yeah. And then, we can look at our magazine and go, okay, so what's happening right now in nature? They're like, Mom, where do the frogs go in the wintertime? Well, that's a really good question. Why don't we find that out?
Right.
Okay. And so just allowing their curiosity to, be the guide there.
Right. So we take advantage of, what do you call them? Like parks but more than parks. There's places, both public and private, that are wildlife preserves.
Yeah. Shaw Nature Reserve is really fun. They have classes. Before COVID, they have overnights where the kids can stay overnight and hike out into the wooded area and literally will be taught how to tap maple syrup.
Yeah, right. Some of our children did that. Yeah,
it was really interesting. They found that really exciting.
So I hope you all are picking up the theme here. you've got to bust out of the box that we learned if you, unfortunately, like us, were government schooled, which is I go to this building and I do schooling and then I walk away from the building and learning stops, right? It's everything. We're in a mode of learning all the time with our children. And we are doing all kinds of different things that don't look like sitting at a desk, but it's all part of the learning process. So it's much more organic. It's much more diverse in terms of what we're doing. It's not all sitting looking at a textbook, right? There's a lot of things going on. Okay, anyway, so you said...
getting out of the house, hands-on.
Do you want to talk about that at all, just when you were first rolling?
Oh,
I think you need to talk about this just because the resources. We are, as you'll see in the links in the show description, as we'll go through in detail, we've got some formal curriculum that we use that we want to share with you just to give you an example. But there's just a lot of online stuff. And I remember this, when Heather was first starting, when they were very young and she hadn't really picked curriculums yet and all that, and they were just too young to maybe push them through a formal curriculum. She'd just be like, I want to have them color something, you know, and she'd go and search around, and there's just so many online resources now. There's just little worksheets and color sheets and, you know, connect the dots where they're learning their numbers. And so you just want them to connect from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. You know, there's a ton of stuff. If you've got a computer and a printer, you have a little curriculum producing machine.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, computer, printer plus internet connection equals more curriculum than you can ever use.
Absolutely.
Right there. So it's a great way, especially when they're young and you're not getting into like going through a formal workbook, to just go and grab something that you just think you would think of it that day. I noticed very often you'd be like, I feel like having them do this. Search, print. Here we go, kids. Boom.
Yeah, it's super easy. And you know, also if you don't have a big budget, which we typically have not had a big budget for homeschooling, you know, you can get so many free resources. You can really do this without purchasing anything. I mean, if you already have a computer and a printer. Yeah,
we're going to show you some things that would cost a little bit of money, not much really.
No.
But you don't need to do that.
Right.
Okay, so for example, then with science, I think you've kind of covered it, but the kinds of things you would do before you had even started a curriculum.
Field trips, videos, little experiments that I thought might be fun. Kids like to blow stuff up. I mean, who doesn't like to blow stuff up? And so we would do stuff in the driveway where, you know, the Mentos and Diet Coke, and it's just shooting into the air, and they're squealing, and it's really fun. You know, you guys would do a little baking soda volcanoes. You know, in the spring, there's a lot of mud. Well, fantastic. Let's get out in the mud, you know, and then they're packing you know, I mean, they would spend 3 hours making the perfect volcano. Okay. That's amazing. But then you'd put some baking soda or something vinegar and have it, you can even, if you really want to be dramatic, you can use red food coloring, and then it's like so lava. You get like a lava eruption. So that's really fun. That's really fun. So I mean, I didn't even do a science curriculum at first. And then later on, as I got really where I had really solidly school age kids, 5th grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade, their curiosity basically directed me to go ahead and choose something, you know, a more formal curriculum for them, you know. So anyway, next thing. And we want to really heavily emphasize this. And that is reading aloud. And of course, that's something you can start extremely early. Right. I mean, I don't know how early is too early, but pretty much they could be born and you could start reading with them, and they're just happy that you're with them and they're hearing your voice. You know? But certainly by the time that they're starting to understand what you say and they're starting to speak, so this would be in the 12 to 18 month range, something like that, right? Then you can start reading stories to them. And, you know, start with little kids stories, whatever. But this is huge, and you should do a lot of it. I read to them at night. We'll talk about that a little more later, or we talked about more. We did. But I would read to them at night. Heather reads to them as part of the schooling, and we'll get into that. But the point is, read. I didn't pull up a study, but I remember seeing something about children who become great readers, highly correlated to parents who read to them. Absolutely. Parents who read themselves and parents who read to their children. So
you are not wasting not only is it a great thing for the relationship with your children, but you're not at all wasting your time simply to read them a silly little story when they're 1 year old or 2 years old.
Right.
It's great. So yeah, that's very important. And then, yeah, again, keeping with this theme of young children. So in case you don't remember from being a child yourself, which hopefully you were, attention span changes as you grow, right? And when you're very young, typically a child is not capable of focus for a long amount of time.
Sure.
When they're really young, they're going to do something, they're going to enjoy it, and then they're just going to walk away and start doing something else, right? So you described teaching in bursts when they're really young, maybe up to like 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And here we're talking about like the 5-year-old, 6-year-old.
Even 7 and 8.
Even 7 and 8,
too.
yeah. You do like 30 minutes, and then you switch it up and do something else, or just let them go
Let's
play.
Get up and move our body, go
Yeah.
run around outside for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll resume.
Right. And it's,
You know?
I part of the reason I wanted to emphasize this is that at least my memory of schooling from when I was, say, kindergarten was a little bit better, but starting at age 6, they really expected you to be just in that desk hour after hour after hour. And it's just not natural. And
it's uncomfortable.
And the boys in particular, they just end up drugging them because it doesn't fit with being a young testosterone high T boy. And so they just end up putting them on drugs so that they'll sit still in the classroom. Well, that's horrible. Mm-hmm. You don't want to do that to your kids, right? And it's just not a reasonable expectation. A 6-year-old child, especially a boy, needs to wiggle and move and do stuff. And you should just plan your day that way, right? And that's what you do.
Yeah, you really have to let go of, okay, from this time to this time, we're going to get all of our schooling done.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. Certainly not when they're young. Not when they're young. So yeah, teaching in bursts, 30 minutes, take a break, have a snack, have your snack while you continue teaching, or continue doing your thing. Lots of hands-on stuff, following their interests. I like to get clay and let them, if we're studying ancient people, then we get out clay and make pottery. That's really fun. And it counts as schooling and it's an art project and things like that.
And, and you described that you can engage you see what their interests are, and then you cleverly bring that interest into a way that fits in with the requirements that you're trying to meet, right?
Yeah.
So they're interested in some topic, and you say, which I've seen you do recently, right? You say, why don't we watch a video that teaches about the history of that, right? And now you're doing history, but it's on a topic that they were getting genuinely curious about. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
I mean, who doesn't love castles? we want to watch something on castles. Oh, fantastic! Let's do that.
Yeah, let's learn about the history of castles.
Right.
Yeah, and now they're getting a little hook into medieval Europe.
Right.
History, medieval European history. Right.
Right.
So yeah, so there's a lot of hopefully you're hearing this. There's a lot of just creativity, paying attention to your children, what they're interested in.
Right.
In the back of your head, you're like, I need to be making sure they're getting history and reading and all these things. Right. How can I just fold their interests into the things I need to get done?
I think also, I hope I'm painting a picture that homeschooling feels different than public school. It's, you're not going to this building to sit there and do this work. It's our life.
Right.
The littles, we're coming alongside of them and they alongside of me, and we're learning and working together throughout the day.
Right.
And this is our life, and, we cook together. They have chores where they're learning how to care for the home. My job, and I've explained this to my kids, my job is to help you to become a functional adult, to provide you with what you need to function as an adult. Okay. And so you need to know how to clean the bathroom. You need to know how to cook. You need to know how to do all these things. And so those are all a part of our homeschool day. They also need to learn how to do math. They also need to learn how to read and write. They also need to have a good foundation in history, in order to understand and interpret the things that are happening. And they need some science so that they can understand the natural world and things like that.
Right.
So it's kind of intuitive, the things that we end up learning in school. But I think the way we go about learning it is much more organic in a homeschool environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so having
So that's littles.
hopefully
Littles.
having set the tone, now let's get into formal schooling. What do I mean by formal schooling?
Okay.
Formal schooling is they're at least 7.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure on the little ones to Heather has some education in psychology and counseling. So I want to bring a couple things in. First of all, about why wouldn't you start homeschooling them at 4, formal schooling them at 4, like they're doing in some cases with the early learning centers and all this. Well, there's at least 2 reasons. One is cognitive, one is physical. So cognitively, why don't you talk about that a bit?
Gosh, I mean, I think you just said it. I mean, they're just not ready. Their brains are just not ready for that. You know, they're young children learn best through play. Right. They learn about the natural world through being out in it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
so
I don't think there's,
facilitate that.
Yeah. I don't know that there's any more to really say. I mean, unless you want me to get
just
into
about
like
brain development.
Yeah.
Just cognitive development is what I was thinking.
Yeah. I mean, all I would say is that they're just not ready. They're not ready. And I wish I could give you more specifics.
Their brains aren't ready.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And then physically, Heather brought up a really good point, which is that.
And I don't know, we pointed to the study that I had on hand about their physical development.
Oh, I didn't know if you had. Okay. Anyway, physical development, writing.
Yeah.
So we expect sometimes at quite young ages that they're taking a pencil and they're learning to write. There's a slight problem with that, which is that the coordination required is just not there at very young ages. And so that's why you'll see them using they put the thing on the pencil to make it thicker.
No. It's to teach them how to hold it correctly. But the problem is until age 7, the bones are actually not even developed in the hand fully. Yeah.
I don't know if you were seeing the x-rays, but they can show you the x-rays and you can see that the hand's just not ready.
They're just not developed enough.
Yeah. So
until age 7.
So your child is not going to be behind because they're not writing flowing cursive at age 5. They're cognitively and physically unable to really do that. And it just is going to be frustrating for all concerned.
Oh, yeah.
When you try to push kids to do something that they're not ready for. And on the other hand, when you wait and you're patient for when it's time, then it just comes easy and it's a joy for everybody involved.
Doesn't necessarily comes easy. I mean, maybe I was one of those kids that I loved writing. I like filling out forms. I like playing office. I mean, some kids are like that. Some kids get joy and pleasure out of just sitting there and writing, but a lot of kids really do not. And I know that a couple of our kids have really struggled, and not just early on, but later, with writing. And, I think it's just a matter of just encouraging them and saying, look, it doesn't have to be perfect right now. This is something that you'll work at. And over time, you will get better at it. So what you're doing right now is great. And let's just keep going with that, and they'll get better at it. So,
okay. So you've been patient. You've waited till they're 7 or whatever.
Leave some time for questions too.
Whatever the age is for the children. And now it's time to do formal schooling. Formal schooling, by which we mean you're doing all the stuff we already talked about. You're taking them on field trips. That never stops, right? But you do start to expect that they're going to do some, textbook type or desk work. Desk work is the better way to put it.
We kind of call it book work or something.
So Heather had some criteria as she looked for curriculum. Well, start with your broad criteria.
My criteria.
First.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't want it to be trendy. I wanted to be free from these, like we're talking about like new math and common core and, all this stuff that people are getting so frustrated with. I wanted it to not be trendy. I didn't want the children to be doing things before that they were physically or cognitively ready. And I wanted it to be clear about what I should be doing and what the students should be doing. In other words, because I was, pregnant and or nursing or both, because I nursed through pregnancies, I just didn't. There were times where I could be creative and I could go, I'll do my own curriculum today. I'll come up with something. But most of the time, I just needed to know what I needed to teach. And so it took me a while to settle on some things. And now we're pretty much in a groove where I kind of know what I use for spelling. Grammar, I kind of do different things on sometimes. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is what I am currently using. This is what's working for me. I'm not saying this is what you should go out and do, but I do feel pretty strongly about my spelling curriculum.
Okay.
But
can you actually show them the spelling?
Yeah. Okay. So what I use for spelling is called Spell to Write and Read. And my understanding is that it's based on curriculum from like the 1700s.
Yeah.
It's old school. There's
so I just have to share the story. Maybe I said this last time, but my friend Academic Agent has been working on these the Trivium courses, which are linked in the show description. I recommend them to you. And he's, the Trivium is logic, grammar, and rhetoric.
Right.
So he's working on his logic course,
Grammar
which
first.
is okay. He's working on his logic course, which just came out, and he's looking at all the different logic textbooks and so forth to try to find good material. And he's finding that it's just too trendy, And so he actually ended up going back to the 19th century to really get good logic books that weren't full of trendy crap, basically.
Right.
And I've heard this a lot from people who really take their schooling seriously. They're like, yeah, I really like the stuff from the 1800s. It kind of all went downhill once we got to the 20th century.
Yeah.
So this is not surprising to learn. Now, this is not directly from the 1700s or whatever.
No, I mean, it's been adapted.
It's based on it.
Yeah.
Based on that approach.
Yeah. So there's a very clear scope and sequence at the beginning. It's first teach this, then teach that, and it's very clear about, it's very clear and consistent in terms of the phonograms. And basically your child will be learning spelling and writing and reading all at the same time.
Right.
And it's been great.
Yeah.
Like, it's been really great. And I think this whole curriculum costs about $100 and you don't need anything else. This is from 7-year-old all the way into college.
Right.
In terms of the level of difficulty,
right.
Latin and Greek roots will be covered in this. They're going to have a lot of opportunity for grammar, for composition, sentence composition, parts of speech. I mean, this is all covered. So I have found it to be really helpful. I know exactly what I'm teaching. And I basically, once I get going on this, and I just haven't looked back. It's so good. I love it.
You said after the first year of doing it, your child will be reading.
Yeah. If they're ready.
Yeah, if they're ready.
If they're ready to, yeah. But yeah. I see no reason why they shouldn't be doing basic reading after the first year.
Yeah. So that's really cool.
And again, go at their pace. Go at their pace. In other words, don't try to speed them through it because you're trying to meet some criteria or what deadline is there? If your goal is for your child to actually learn, then let them learn. Yeah. There's actually a Bible verse about that. Go at the pace of the children.
Really?
Yeah, it was in the Old Testament. They told the adults, go at the pace of the children because they were traveling. That's a lot. There's some wisdom in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I use for spelling. And then you can, but I don't always do this. I often just go to the dollar store and get, a little composition book from there. But they do have a little learning log. And this was one of our kids. They can write their spelling list in there. This was from years ago, one of our little kids. And then they learn how to do sentences. And then in the back, we cover things like all the different spelling rules that they have, the 1-1-1-1 rule, and, all the different spelling rules that will basically bring about excellence in spelling. And will really help them to get mastery of the English language, because that is our goal. I want them to have mastery of the English language. So that's what I use for spelling.
Okay.
For science.
Yeah, and we had something else to bring up here, which is
yes, I'm going to get into that.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into that. You can use a topic that's of interest.
Yeah.
But then you're hitting multiple subjects while you're talking about that topic, right? Yes. Because again, you're breaking out of the Prussian school style system, which is what most of us experienced in state schools, which is firewalls between subjects.
Right.
You don't want that. Break down the walls, right? Yes, you kind of maybe structure your curriculum and organize it a little bit in terms of science versus grammar and all that. But really, all these things are interrelated, right?
Absolutely.
To learn about science is to learn about history. Right. For example.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that a lot of moms have gone ahead of us by this point and recognize that, gosh, I have multiple grade levels that I need to teach. How can I knock this all out, with all these kids? So science is a great subject to be able to do that with. So again, I chose a classical curriculum. Now, we are Christians, and so the curriculum I chose to sort of teach by is a creationist curriculum. However, I have also taught evolution alongside creationism because it's really important to me that our kids just know all of that. And so what I've done is I have a curriculum by Apologia is the company. And so we did Exploring Creation with Zoology 1. And this gives them a good foundation for, what is a cell? And what's lovely about this particular curriculum is that the assignments are not grade level related, but they're related to where the child is in terms of their learning. So they'll have a workbook that goes with I actually have a workbook for a different zoology. This is Zoology 2. And my older kids were learning how to do note-taking and things like that. So you can see that she was doing note-taking. So I would be doing lecturing and she would be doing note-taking. And whereas the little kids maybe had a picture that they were coloring, she really got into note-taking with this. So she's filled a whole page with her notes. So that was older kids. Where the younger kids, they had a junior notebook. And so they would be doing coloring while I was reading the chapter to them out loud.
Oh, yeah. This addresses
the multi-grade level.
A question that people have had for us.
Multi-age level, I should say.
What do you do with multi-age level?
Yeah.
In America, we have the tradition of the one-room schoolhouse, right?
Yeah.
All the grades are there in one room.
Yeah.
And how does that work? Mm-hmm. Well, partially the tradition is that older children help teach younger children.
Absolutely.
And that helps them learn the subject well,
yeah.
because teaching always drives it home best, right?
Yes.
When you teach something.
Yes.
But also what you're describing, which is you can be talking about one thing,
mm-hmm.
but the activities are graded for the children, right?
Right.
So the older children have a more challenging activity on whatever the topic is.
Yes.
And the younger children are just coloring something,
right.
or whatever.
And
in between.
Sometimes the older children are directly engaged in teaching the younger children. Unbeknownst to me, one of our older kids taught our fourth born to read. So when I sat down, it was her. It was her who did it. And so when I sat down to assess at 7 years old, when I sat down to assess, okay, where are we? What does he need for us to begin? I discovered he was already reading.
And you didn't know she was even working with him on that. Yeah.
Now that makes me seem neglectful or something. Like, I don't know what's going on with my kids.
It's awesome. I think it's beautiful.
They're playing.
That's amazing.
But I think what's fun about having the different grade levels and kids not being age segregated is that learning becomes this real collaborative effort. Mm-hmm. The older kids get to, I know the answer to that. And they get to feel confidence that they have learned something, and now they get to impart that learning to other kids, right. And that's really fun. That's really positive. It builds the relationships between the siblings because they're helping learn and teach together. So it's really lovely. It can be a real lovely experience. Sometimes it's not lovely. Sometimes they're getting on each other's nerves and they're fighting. And I'm like, go outside for 10 minutes and get it out of your system.
Yeah, we send them to the trampoline sometimes.
Yeah. So
okay. Anything else on science you want to talk about? I think you covered that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let's talk about math.
So each day I tend to cover between 3 and 4 subjects. And usually, I give them time to go. They like to get up and they like to play Minecraft and whatnot. So I let them have that time. At 9 o'clock, they need to be sitting at the dining table. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
You are.
But at 9 o'clock, but we're going to go back up our notes. At 9 o'clock, we're sitting down at the table, and I begin while they eat their breakfast, because I have a captive audience. I begin with history, and we've been working through Story of the World, which again is a classical. It says history for the classical child. And what I love about this, because I was public schooled in the United States, it's very United States centric. It's very focused on the history here. And I didn't really get a lot of world history. Mm-hmm. And so I really wanted them to have world history. I wanted them to know about all the different cultures and all the, because I find that really enriching. Right. And so basically we sit down and I read a chapter or so. And then if there's something that really captures their attention, then we'll go and we'll maybe pull it up on YouTube and watch a between 10 and 30 minute video if they want to go deeper. So we just actually finished ancient times, and now we're reading medieval history, and they're very engaged in this.
Right. In ancient times, we'll cover China, India, Egypt.
Oh yeah.
You know, ancient Egypt and so forth.
Yes.
It's not just the usual thing of, you know, there was Greece, and then there was Rome, and then there was Europe, and then there was us. It's being a much more global in the focus.
Absolutely. And I really enjoy it. I like reading it to them too. And so, you know, I'm not gonna spend the kind of time on something that I'm not engaged in as well, you know. So let's see the next subject.
Well, that's let's see. Oh yeah, just
narrative.
That, that the history of the world is more of like telling a story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very narrative, and you know, I remember in elementary school that reading comprehension was this big thing, and you know, it is in classical education as well, but we go about it differently. We do something called narration, which is that I will read them something and then I will ask them questions. Okay, so tell me what happened and then what happened next. And then they have to answer me in complete sentences. So they're getting the structure. I'm making sure that they're understanding what they're learning. And then if they answer in a fragment, I say, no, that's not a complete sentence. What is it? What comprises a complete sentence?
Right.
Well, it needs to have a subject, needs to have a verb. You know, so again, there's this interconnection.
You're talking about history, but you're bringing in grammar.
Bringing in grammar, I'm bringing in reading. I mean, all the subjects are totally connected with each other.
Right. And it's important. John Taylor Gatto, who we talked about last time, John Taylor Gatto says it's really important to see the interrelatedness between things, and it's really destructive in the Prussian system, in the Prussian style system that the state schools use. That they keep things so firewalled from each other. They don't let you see the interrelatedness of things. It's not good.
Yeah,
it's not good for critical thinking. Oh, in fact, we already had, that was a point we were going to talk about. Is there anything else we want to say? Because we're doing this.
Connection.
Yeah, children want to understand why. Why is this important?
Yes.
Seeing that the subjects are related to each other helps them answer the why, right? To understand that things are relevant to daily life. The example we already mentioned, one example was doing cooking in the kitchen and using math, and Heather's telling them, I use math every day. Every day. Right? Because I remember that feeling of being in government school and I'm working on something. I'm like, what is the point of this? You know? So by showing the interrelatedness, by bringing things up when you're talking about something else, or just when you're going about the house doing something, bringing up how this is relevant, that shows them that these things are relevant and not just boring, because when it's boring, people are unmotivated and don't want to learn. Right. When they see no point to it. I'm sorry. When it seems pointless. Right. Okay. So let's turn to math. Okay. So I knew going into this that math was not my strong subject, and I have gotten better at it. Better at it. I mean, I remember our friend Charlene, you know, saying that she really got a chance to do math over because she didn't feel like she had mastered math very much when she was a student, and by teaching her children, she gained confidence in that area that she didn't have before. So it can be an opportunity. I think that's really great to bring that up, because people will say, yeah, but I'm not good at this or that subject, and I'll have to be teaching the kids. Well, it's also an opportunity. Yeah, it is. Right. Again, personal growth. Yeah. Don't be afraid of personal growth. It's really okay. Yeah. you can grow. I mean, I'm hurtling toward 50 here, and I'm growing. Right. You know? So I knew math was not my strong subject. I was also excited at the prospect of maybe going back and picking up some things that I, didn't understand, because I was forced to keep going at the pace that the school system had set. So I chose this curriculum, Math UC, because it comes with a little video that they watch. It is based on mastery. So in other words, they gain mastery and then they get to move on to the next level. So it's not grade level, it's just level of mastery. And it also interconnects the various disciplines, as they're moving through it. Now, I think one of our children is quite gifted, actually more than one is quite gifted in math. And, I think that particular child might be ready to move on to something a little more challenging. But again, you're not locked in. Right. We're not locked in. Just because I'm doing this year doesn't mean I have to do it next year. You watch your children and you watch yourself and you just make a change. If
you just make a change. So this is the teacher instruction book. There's a very brief chapter on the, brief reading on the chapter. So you can teach it to your child if you want, or they can watch the little video. And then there's a few practice sheets afterward, and they're not like doing stacks and stacks of worksheets. They are practicing related to the lesson, and then we move on, and so there's a pace, there's a nice pace to it. So I've really liked this. Other parents, I've said, they swear by some other curriculum. Fantastic.
Well, Saxon math.
Yeah, that was popular for a really long time. Yeah, exactly. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is language. I don't use this particular curriculum as much anymore. I kind of use it more as a guide, mostly because I found it to be extraordinarily repetitious. But so I actually just skip ahead when I feel like we've done it enough, that particular subject now. But so I use first language lessons. Again, this is a classical
language lessons for the well-trained mind.
Yeah, first language lessons.
You'll find that in
the well-trained mind.
The description.
So here's what I like about this. And again, I kind of jumped in using this curriculum years ago because I just didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. But here's what I really like about it. Poetry memorization. They have the children memorizing poems. And I love poetry, really do. And so I love that they're getting exposed to this beautiful art form, and they're training their mind by having to memorize poetry from a very young age. It goes through all the parts of speech. They learn sentence diagramming. They're really getting a solid foundation in what is the English language, what is it comprised of, all that. The main thing I don't like is that it is extraordinarily repetitious. So that's my only critique. But so that's what we use. I do a lot of printing things online. This year I found an entire 6th grade curriculum that I'm actually using for my 4th and 6th grader, because they're both, I can just give it to both of them. And I've been printing worksheets from this particular PDF document, and we've been using that for grammar, where they actually are practicing the various parts of speech and things like that. So, but mainly the first language lessons basically gave me sort of a scope and sequence. Like, okay, first we're going to learn nouns, then we're going to learn verbs, etc., so that I didn't have to, come up with that on my own. So, yeah, I cover about 3 to 4 subjects a day where I'm actually directly doing the teaching. And then the rest of the time they're reading. Usually they're reading about an hour a day, a book of their choice. And then they're pursuing their own interests. Now, one kid likes to go down to the wood shop and do metalworking. Obviously, our 15-year-old likes to paint. Another child is really getting into making her own clothes. And so she's mastering sewing and embroidery and things like that. And so they have the rest of the afternoon to pursue those interests.
I'm just sharing a poetry channel since we mentioned poetry, and I've really become a fan of a channel called The End of Everything. And his channel is just, I hadn't remembered how few people are subscribed to his channel, and it's just crazy. He writes poetry. He reads poetry, classic British poetry. And it's snowing.
Yeah,
awesome.
The snow has begun here.
Sorry. And it's really great. I just really recommend that channel. Okay, so I think we really covered all this. So let's talk about the structure of the day, which you have kind of hit in bits and pieces, but let's just go through it. So they get up and basic self-care, brush teeth, get dressed, make their beds. Since we do let them play in the morning, like play Minecraft or something, one boundary we'll have is you don't get to touch a device until you have
done basic self-care.
Right.
Yeah.
That's your ticket to getting to have fun.
Because homeschooling is about teaching children how to live life.
Right.
Okay. So we need to, there should be some focus, I think, on basic skills and things. I mean, we have the 7-year-old who, when he's looking for something to wear, it looks like his drawers exploded, onto the, so, we deal with all the same stuff that everybody else deals with. Our kids fight, they hit each other, they're messy, they're selfish,
Right.
So I just try to sort of work into the day. Here's the basic life skills we're going to be learning. Then they get a little bit of gaming time, and then they have to be sitting down. And if they haven't eaten yet, they need to eat breakfast, and we start history while we're doing breakfast. Once we clean up our breakfast, which basically is put your bowl in the dishwasher, and then we head to our schoolhouse. Now, we bought a property that has a main farmhouse that is really old. It's a pre-Civil War farmhouse. And then we have a separate building, which is a 2-bedroom apartment above the garage. We are in the first floor of that. The garage is next to us. And I use that space as my schoolhouse. And I actually rent it through Airbnb because I've got it fixed up. So during the week, we use it as a schoolhouse. We head over there, and we usually, they get started on their math. They're supposed to get over there and get going on their math. And I'll be there in a minute to do the other subjects that you actually need me to, do the teaching on. So, so we do that until about noon, 12:30. And then we break for lunch.
Wait, did you cover all this?
Yeah. I mean, I cover whatever other subject. Well, we've already done history over breakfast, and we do math, and I do science and grammar, or math and spelling and grammar, or whatever. Usually they're doing math and history and some kind of grammar every single day. So that's with my elementary age kids. My older kids, the 3 teenagers, they are completely self-directed at this point. So they get up and then they go ahead. I don't have to really be engaged very much in their schooling. They do some online stuff, and then they have a couple subjects that maybe I'm still checking on with them, but mostly they're self-directed at this point, and they're age 14 up.
Did you cover this, that after lunch, there typically wouldn't be formal schooling?
That's correct. Unless they didn't finish something from earlier, then they need to wrap that up.
Right. But generally, the children are going to read. They're going to dig into the things they want to do.
Right.
Our one daughter paints. Right.
Exactly. They're free to do those things. It can still count as school, but I'm not doing any formal teaching. So
I just want to make clear the structure here in terms of as the children get older. Right. We talked about the early pre-formal schooling where they're doing a lot of outings, doing a lot of hands-on things, being read to a lot. Right. Then there's the formal schooling, and then there's the self-guided learning, which Heather was just starting to talk about. So I'm sort of thinking of this as 3 stages.
Yeah.
Right. So that, in other words, where you end up with is that you're not even really teaching them anymore. They're maybe getting instruction because they're using an online course or whatever. But the point is, they are now guiding their own learning to a great degree.
Yes.
And that's what we really want to produce, right? We want to produce adults who are continual learners. Right. And feel confident that they can take a subject on, find some videos, find a book, whatever. Yep. Dig into it and learn it.
Yes.
That's what you want, right?
Yeah. And
that's what everybody should have that confidence and skill to think, I have the tools of learning. I am capable, because I've already been doing it, of taking on a subject that I never really knew much about, but suddenly I want to know about it or need to know about it for my job or whatever. And I'm going to go find some material, dig in, and I'm going to learn it. I'm going to master it.
Right. And that's really confidence building for them. They really, and this year they actually, I had my older 3 take over logging their subjects and things like that, because they need to learn the skill of organizing their time and recording what it is that they're doing, So again, that's a life skill that I'm teaching alongside, their regular learning that is state required.
We have not started this yet, though we're looking into it.
I'm going to grab my chapstick. Excuse me.
We've not looked into this, though it's quite,
I'm back.
It's quite common with homeschoolers. I'm sorry, we have just started to look into this. Yeah. But it's quite common for homeschoolers that by the time the teenagers have been doing some online, some self-guided learning, you start wanting to really be getting them into higher education. Yeah. And so it's quite common for homeschooled teenagers to start doing courses at community colleges. We checked in with one of our local ones, and they said it's absolutely fine for like a 15-year-old,
even our 14-year-old.
Yeah. 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 So because sometimes you have a child who's just really bright in some particular area, and they're shooting past everything you can teach them. Yeah. You need to find some better instruction for them. Well, there are options. Right. I mean, obviously, everything's on YouTube for one thing. Don't underestimate that. But also, you can look into community college courses. So,
yeah, absolutely.
We talked about
that. It's not uncommon for homeschoolers teenage homeschoolers to be starting community college.
Okay, and we already
So,
covered all this.
yeah, I
So
think so.
we're good. Okay, yeah. So final topic that we prepared, and then we'll get into your questions. We'll start with super chats, of course. Is homeschooling co-ops. So this is something that if you don't know anything about homeschooling, you wouldn't know. But inside the world of homeschooling, everybody knows that you're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are other people doing homeschooling around you, and you can get hooked up with them in various ways. There's often local homeschooling associations and such. You can get hooked up with them in various ways, and well, lots of things. But let's start with the classic co-op situation where you share teaching. Talk about that.
Yeah. So, you know, since I first started homeschooling, I was aware that there were teaching co-ops, and basically just a group of moms decided that they wanted to get together and share the burden of teaching each other's children. Now, at our old church, there were a lot of families who were homeschooling, and several of the mothers were bilingual. One was just really brilliant in the area of engineering and physics, I think. You know, anyway, there was a really lovely broad skill set among these moms. And so they had certain times of the week where they would actually meet at the church building, and then they would you know, use the rooms there and basically have their own little school, you know, and then they would do field trips together and all that sort of thing. Now, when that was going on, I only had little kids, and I wasn't, you know, did not participate in that. But since then, I have participated in some co-ops, mostly for extracurricular activities. You know, the co-op up here, as well as in mid-county, West County, has park days. And so every Wednesday from such and such time, you know, I can bring all the kids, and then they get opportunities to be social. You know, a lot of the co-ops will have Valentine's parties, Halloween parties, where people can dress up and, you know, exchange candy or cards or whatever. There's lots of things.
We talked about it last time, but we have a single mom friend who was feeling a bit overwhelmed, and felt like she just was not keeping up with certain subjects, and so Heather actually started teaching her 4 daughters. What is it? Which subjects?
We were doing grammar and spelling, and we still are.
Right. And they moved, and Heather's still teaching them.
I'm teaching them remotely. Yeah, they're like all the way across the United States now, and I'm still teaching them. So they would come on Wednesdays, and basically that would be our spelling and grammar, like an extra spelling and grammar time where I would really focus on some things. And I would teach however many kids at once, you know, and then of course they would get the social opportunity. And I got a social opportunity too, because I got to talk to the mom.
Right.
You know?
Right. So the point is, you're not alone. Most of what we've talked about are things you can do with your children without anyone else, but you can also get help from others, which is just encouraging.
Absolutely.
To have other people that you can talk to who are doing this too, and they can give you tips and share knowledge. But also you can take advantage of the fact that you have certain knowledge and other parents have different knowledge, and you can do, basically it's a barter, right? I'm going to barter teaching your children this for you teaching my children what you know. Right. And then the other thing I wanted to mention on this is that they will sometimes do some other things. They'll do like dances. I don't think we've done any of those, but I know
not yet.
Available.
Oh yeah, well, there's a co-op here that they have homecoming dances, proms, graduation.
Right.
Art show, you know, contests.
Well, that's the one I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
They'll do some contests. So we did participate in an art show at more than once. At least once.
Yeah, no, more than once.
More than once.
Yeah, our oldest won first prize.
Yeah, that's true.
One year.
Our children who are interested in art, this gave them a chance to actually compete and win a prize, you know. But there was a photography section. There was painting and so forth. And it was really fun to walk around. Now, I think I mentioned this last time, but just another opportunity to not forget to mention again in this video, which is there are homeschool conferences. And, you know, 70% of it is people pushing their curriculum, which is helpful if you don't know what curriculum you want to use.
You get to sort of look it over before you buy it,
and you can ask questions.
Yeah,
you can ask questions to the people at the booths and all that. But also there'll be people, homeschooled kids that are selling some art they're making. There's just all kinds of fun stuff. It's a great community event for homeschoolers. And it is as I recommended before, I think it is a great thing to do if you are looking towards homeschooling, considering homeschooling, and you just feel like you know nothing.
Yeah.
Just look for a nearby homeschool conference. If we ever get to be around each other again, look for a nearby homeschool conference. Go to it. Bring your fiance or your woman you're courting or whatever. Right? And make it a date is what I'm saying. And go to the homeschool conference.
If he's not scared away, then you're.
Yeah. It's a good vetting mechanism for your prospective mate, right?
Right.
If they come out of there jazzed and being like, oh, I'm looking forward to having children so we can homeschool them. You're in like Flint. But yeah, it's just a great way to get exposure to the community and the resources available, and the creativity and just the tenor, the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that struck me most of all was seeing young homeschooling children who had gone deep on something and no one was making fun of them for being a geek.
I know.
Right? It was just normal. It was normal that you had an interest that was really interesting to you. You had really gotten into it. And so you had made a robot, or you had done a handmade telescope or something. Yeah.
Remember that?
He constructed his own telescope.
Constructed his own telescope. It was huge.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
It was a serious
telescope. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I was so impressed. I was like, man, these kids are really geeking out on stuff. And it's totally encouraged and cool because they're able to get mastery. They're able to go deep.
Right. Right. And it's encouraging.
That's a good feeling.
You can go with your children. If you have children, go with your children so that they can see, oh, I can be ambitious. I can come up with some crazy project and go for it.
Right.
I mean, you saw young people doing amazing things.
Cool. Yeah. Really
amazing. Like the adults are going like, whoa.
Yeah. This is awesome.
You did that? How old are you? What?
Yeah.
It's really impressive. So just a really great, how do I put it? Like a cultural community opportunity to just kind of soak in the atmosphere. Because like Heather was talking about, there's a lot of detoxing. If you've been in government school like we were,
true.
You were really in a dysfunctional system.
Yeah.
And unlearning that dysfunction and learning how it ought to be is not going to come easy. It's going to be a real shift. And so just being around people who have made that shift, soaking in the atmosphere, seeing what the children are like, seeing what the adults are like, seeing how the children interact with each other. Yeah. It's all such a big shift from the toxic environment of a state school. Yeah. At least the state schools I knew about. Okay, so I think that covers most of the material we wanted to cover. I just want to emphasize again, I saw at least one person asking about one of the books. I have put links in the description of the YouTube video. So just go right all the way to the bottom. It says resources mentioned, and I've got links to a number of resources.
One resource I didn't mention, which maybe we'll go back in the comments and put on there. This was just 1 year that I bought a teacher's logbook. Oh my gosh, there's tons of websites. Lots of homeschool moms have designed their own logging pages, that can be used in various states, so like some states only require this thing and other states require this thing. Well, you can just go print for free all these, logging material and just put it in a binder and off you go. So,
okay, let's see here. As usual, there was one I wanted to highlight if I could still see it as a teaser. Oh, it's not here. Okay, anyway, jury rigging had asked about cry it out and how that affects. We are not going to talk about that. Because we got to save something.
Talk about that, right?
We got to save something for a future stream.
Ooh, okay. All right.
Because
hold me back.
Here, wait a sec. I'm going to find this real quick so I can read it, just so I can tell them that we're not going to do it this time.
That's not fair. Isn't that very nice?
I can't find it. But anyway, jury rigging. It wasn't a super chat, but jury rigging had just asked about cry it out. Here it is. Maybe you should mention how the cry it out method in infancy probably is going to cause issues when the kids are reaching school age. We're not going to talk about that, because these are homeschooling streams. And I think my wife and I found this first one we did really great. really great reception, a lot of great feedback. So it's been very encouraging. And Heather, so I want to save our fire on some other topics that I think Heather could really cover well, but I'll just tell you what some potential topics would be. Heather nursed all of our children. She has a lot to say on that topic.
By nursed, you mean breastfed?
Breastfed,
Yeah.
yeah. She,
just in case terminology is different.
She, after a few months of trying something close to a cry it out method, or kind of sort of,
We never really did it.
Never really
We
did it. But that's what we thought we were going to try to do, and then we realized that was a nuts, and we switched to attachment parent.
This is a big
well, just save it.
subject.
So
controversial.
You know, I think Heather has a lot to say on that, and then birth.
Oh yeah.
We've done 7 births, if you count the twins as one,
right?
Because that was sort of one birth event that produced 2 children, right?
Right.
We had 7 birth events. 4 were home births.
Right.
Hospital.
Yes.
There was 1 C-section out of the 7.
Right.
Heather's done it all, is my point. She's done all
the
the
twins were born, Stephen published my birth
stats,
my birth stats,
which we'll save for the birth stream.
Like I was
like a baseball
ball player or something.
Yeah, I calculated stats and stuff. It was like an academic agent moment for those of you who know how he likes to be statistical about everything. Anyway, so Heather's had experience with all kinds of different sorts of birth and has learned a lot about how birth has changed over the last century and a half.
Oh yeah.
Not to the betterment of women's situation, I think.
I mean, it's,
in many respects.
Antibiotics are fantastic.
Well, antibiotics are good, yeah, but there's some other things that are not so good. So anyway,
I love to talk about birth.
Yeah. So we really have a great birth stream to do as well. So I think we have a couple more streams just focused on some things that Heather's been doing as a parent in her parenting. So, nice comment there. Can I highlight it? And then we'll get into super chats. Sorry, they're distracting me by. Eleutheria says, I devoured everything Heather wrote for Lou Rockwell, I want more.
Thank you.
If you search up LouRockwell.com, Heather Carson.
Heather M. Carson, I think.
Yeah.
I've written about midwifery. I wrote about cry it out, with attachment parenting, all kinds of
courting,
stuff.
which someone asked about. There's an article on that.
Right.
The evil of dating, it's called. Anyway, some great stuff, spicy stuff. Okay.
Spicy.
Let's go through some super chats, which for some reason in my view here show as February 3rd, but I know they're from today. I don't know why they did that. Okay. So there's a bug. Okay. Several from the one here to stay, I guess, to stay.
Did you miss that one?
I start from the bottom and go up.
Oh.
That's the oldest one.
I see.
So
okay.
Would you say your wife is a Proverbs 31 wife? Well, I'd have to go through Proverbs 31 to respond in detail, but I will say this. One of the things that I remember being struck by when I was young and reading Proverbs 31 that sort of surprised me, I guess, is that
I did.
One of the things that surprised me is that it talked about the wife being entrepreneurial, which I kind of didn't expect reading the Bible. I guess I had some idea of what a trad wife, as we would now say, is, and that surprised me. I'm like, oh, she's entrepreneurial, which is definitely, read Proverbs 31, you'll see it.
Yeah.
Well, Heather does things that are to the benefit of our family life, but also does things that are entrepreneurial, and sometimes these things overlap. So 2 examples. She already mentioned that we now run an Airbnb. She now runs an Airbnb.
That's been great fun.
Out of our property. We've been doing that several years.
3 years.
It's really her business because I'm busy with my full-time job.
Yep.
It's really her business. She is able to pay our teenagers, or well, not even just teenagers, but pay older children who are interested and capable to help with turning it over, doing the cleaning and everything.
And stuff, yeah.
So that gives them a chance to work because we believe in child labor in these parts, right? These libertarian parts. So that gives them a chance to learn to do some work that really needs to be done, which is really helpful for teenagers to not feel that life is just pointless, right? They need to be involved with activities that need to get things that need to really get done. So they need to get involved with that, and they get experience getting paid for their work, which is a good experience, right? And they have money. They decide, I want to get something, and they have some money that they've earned, and they're like, Mom, can I get this? We're like, you earn the money.
It's your money.
You decide how you want to spend it.
Yeah, I mean, moving to this property has certainly provided entrepreneurial opportunities. We keep certain livestock.
That's the next thing I wanted to bring up.
I mean,
so we have chickens and ducks.
Yeah.
We just got, as we mentioned, quail chicks.
They're so cute.
And so not only is it fun for our children and a fun aspect of the property, it's an aspect of the Airbnb. People often comment in their reviews, I loved seeing the chickens. I live in the city. I don't get to be around animals. You know? But also we sell the duck egg to Chinese restaurants because they like
Vietnamese restaurants.
And Vietnamese, they like to turn the duck eggs, pickle them, and they do various things with those. We don't know what'll happen with this, but we think quail eggs might be of interest. We found out what the going rate is for ducks, and we're like, ooh, we'd like to have some quail eggs to sell. That would be nice. So Heather is doing things that are at home, both the Airbnb, which is on our property, it's in a second building we have here, and the livestock, the farm fowl. It's all here, so she doesn't have to go somewhere else.
Right.
But she can be making some money. Right. So I thought that was something to share on the Proverbs 31. Next, from the one here to stay, says, how do you intend to advise your kids to date in the future? As a great example to your kids, isn't biblical courting the best way? I will elaborate in chat. Can't catch it in chat, but I usually share it. I'll share it again. That article called The Evil of Dating, which really got people talking, shall we say, when it was published a long time ago now. And that is in the chat.
I don't think I can answer that question
right now.
I mean, I wrote that article however many years ago.
Well, that's all I was going to do
to
that.
That might be a different stream.
Yeah.
Talking about dating and courtship and those kinds of things. But thank you for the question.
Yes. The one here to stay. Do you guys follow Dave Ramsey's baby steps? I do not know about Dave Ramsey. I've heard of the name Dave Ramsey, but no, sorry. We're familiar with that. And then finally, he says, here's a donation for just being a Christian family. God bless you and all the best. Thank you.
Thanks.
Then Miki, our friend from Czechia, says, well, sadly, here in my country, we do have harsh standards, making homeschooling almost impossible. Oh, I didn't know that about Czechia.
Oh, wow.
I hope it changes by the time I have family. Oh, that's really terrible. Miki also says, it's fascinating, though it's not mandatory in our country. I was homeschooled by my grandma from the age of 4 in basic counting, reading, and other basics.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. And that multi-generational stuff is just gold.
I know, that's lovely.
When you can do it. Lambda says, how should a homeschool parent decide how many years of education is appropriate for each child?
Well, I mean, to some degree, that's going to be dictated by by the laws of the state or country that you're in. Missouri requires us to keep a log in school from age 7 to 17.
Right.
So I'm required to do that. Now, as I shared, I think our teenagers are going to be going ahead courses soon. So I don't have to be, necessarily directly involved in what they're being taught. Although I have to say that, I guess maybe this is along the lines of that patience concern, that because I have put so much time and effort into my relationships with my kids, you can't possibly expect to teach your child if you do not have a good, nurturing relationship with your child, And so if I'm running into flack in my teaching with them, then maybe they're angry with me about something, and maybe we need to talk about that. Maybe we need to focus more on the relationship that day, So, I think, as I said, our older kids, I'm now backing away and I'm less hands-on with their education. And that was just really something that happened very organically. But in terms of how, we are accountable to be engaged in some kind of education of our children until they're 17 years old. But
yeah, it could end up being community college courses and stuff by the end of that time. Yeah, and this is a whole different topic. And our oldest child is 16. So we're not quite there yet. But I notice that not only libertarians, like if you look at LouRockwell.com, for example, but homeschoolers in general seem potentially a little bit less religious about the college thing. Now, homeschoolers do go to top universities and do very well, but I don't think there's that same sort of like every child must go to college or we've failed attitude.
Right.
There's more of an openness to, well, college sometimes being a bit of a scam, right? Depending on what you're doing there. And just that there's a lot of ways to learn, and there's a lot of things to do that either don't require college or we think of them as requiring college, and you can really get into them without that. So speaking of my own field, one of my colleagues, a very good friend of mine for many years, and we've worked together at several jobs, I think he did a little bit of college in computer science, which is our area. But mostly he just started working quite early. Yeah. He was already working before he was taking those courses. He just got out there and got experience. And he works alongside people who have masters and stuff, and he does perfectly fine. So I think it's very helpful. If you haven't read anything like this, I think Thomas Sowell might be very good on this subject, for instance. You might want to just break your mind a little bit free from the idea that the only possible path for every child is to send them to college. Right. And open your mind to other ways for them to have a successful life that don't necessarily involve becoming indebted immediately at the beginning of their adult life. Yeah. I mean, of course, it was pushed. College was pushed on all of us, maybe your age, my age, and then, even now people are graduating and they're not being able to get jobs, and maybe they didn't really know what they wanted to do. They just had to go to college because that's what you're supposed to do. And, I think that because the foundation of homeschooling is your relationship with your child, you're getting to know them, you're helping them learn how to get to know themselves. Maybe they're discovering that they have an interest in something. And so as they move into adulthood, you can really encourage and help them to tailor their next steps to be much more in line with what their gifts are. Not everybody is meant to go to college. Right. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they want to do woodworking or, go into a trade or something like that. And and that has great value in our society. Yeah. And my understanding is we're really low on people going into the skilled trades. Yeah. In the United States. Because of the tremendous pressure from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s to go to college. Yeah. People moved away from those fields, but anyway. Okay. Mickey, thanks, Lambda. Mickey says there's so many resources you can get for free and infinite resources you can get for the price of the internet. We live in the first intellectually independent age. It's great. Oh, it's fantastic. Totally. I love it. Mickey says they like castles. How about a trip to a country with lots of them? I've heard Czechia is a nice place. Sheep too, and Radlib may get some ideas for essays. we certainly hope to travel, but one boundary that I had is I cannot travel with a baby. I cannot do any major traveling with a baby. It's just too hard for me. So wow. Mickey says, I want to know more about what American dances look like. We have quite elaborate classical dance classes in every second high school. Oh, wow. It's nothing like that here. No, we don't. If you want to learn dancing, that's something you have to seek out from a private dance school or something like that. Yeah. So. They don't teach you that. And then Kimberly Bolger says, cannot wait to hear about birth and parenting. Yeah, I think there's going to be an audience for that. And it's a subject that Heather can really comment on because, as I said, 7 birth events, 8 children. Mm-hmm. And also you got interested in it and started doing some research about the history of it. Yeah. And you can find one of her articles on that topic at LouRockwell.com. Yeah, the midwifery article touches a lot on, on why home birth. Okay, so we're about at the end. Super chats are the best way to get our attention because not because I'm just being greedy or anything, but because actually the chats scroll off. Yeah. So when you don't do a super chat, I can't get back to your chat once the chats have scrolled off. So that's part of the reason to do that. So, but I'll try to cover a couple others. Saritza Luna, that's a good name. Do you have any suggestions for those unable to have their children be homeschooled, whatever the reasons may be, but still want to minimize the negative effects of state schools? Yeah, well, we haven't done that ourselves, but that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Maybe one for us to think about as a community. I don't know that we can't give you like concrete, like, oh, this is what we've done because we homeschooled from the beginning. But I would say reading to them is something that I know makes a difference regardless of what their formal schooling situation is. If you're reading to your children from a young age, that definitely is correlated with good outcomes. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Gosh. You know, I think because there is, you know, in our first talk on homeschooling, from the book, Dumbing Us Down, you know, public school really takes away a child's autonomy on many levels. It takes away their intellectual autonomy, emotional autonomy, and physical autonomy. And I think being your child's advocate is really important on those topics. You know, really helping them if they're overwhelmed, if the subject matter that they're learning at school, you know, I don't know. I would just advocate for your child. Really listen to them, pay attention to them, stay connected to them. It's really hard to stay connected to your child when you're apart from each other all day long, every day. You've got to stay connected to your child if you want to minimize these negative effects. You know, I think a lot of parents just have you know, there's all these videos that come out, not this year because of COVID, but right around the time, late August, well, now it's middle of August, they're pulling kids back in school. There will be a barrage of videos of parents partying because their kids are back in school. What message does that send? How do you feel about being a mom? How does your child, I mean, maybe, you know, it's all in fun and it's a joke, but really, is your child internalizing the sense that, you know, they're a burden to you? Right. You know, so if you're partying when your kid goes back to school, then you're a participant in the negative emotional effects of sending them to a state school. So I think that you really need to work on your relationship. I don't have to work as hard because they're with me all day long. They are in my face. I am forced to work on my relationship with them. But I think that you really have to stay focused on your relationship with your kid if you're going to help to undermine those negative effects.
Okay, so I think we've done all the super chats. I'm going to pick up one more thing that Mickey put in the regular chat. Just checking one more time. Okay, just because it's really amusing. Okay. Mickey says, we have this innovative teacher here. I could go on for hours. Her innovative methods of teaching of combining several subjects, like building a human body and then burning it as a medieval heretic. Okay, that's pretty cool. Based, as
that's
we say.
That's a riot.
And then,
oh wow.
Oh wait.
That would certainly be a memorable learning experience.
Then this teacher had a currency in her class and sold some of her kids to slavery to another class. And in the end, she did a currency reform to simulate how the commies stole things in the Czech Republic.
That's amazing.
So anyway.
See, that really emphasizes that there are some really neat, interesting, loving, caring, smart people that are working in public schools. Yep. And so please know that just because we're deciding to homeschool and that we're kind of down on the public school does not mean we are down on the people there who are really loving and really encouraging and coming alongside these kids and being a mentor in their life, you know? Yeah,
one of my beloved teachers was my Latin teacher. I studied Latin with him for 6 years, from 7th grade to 12th grade. And that's where I learned all my English grammar. Because we were learning another language, we had to be thinking about the structure, right? Yeah. You don't necessarily think about the structure of your language because you just speak it. You just grow up speaking it. But we were thinking about the structure of the language, and teaching us about Latin, he would be like, well, this is like in English. And I'd be like, really? I don't know about that. And he's teaching us about English, you know? He was more rigorous. He was a little older in his style, more rigorous, and he would push us harder than a lot of the teachers, you know. And he was funny. And anyway, so I have a fond memory of Mr. Gans. Sadly,
I think we all have teachers like that, you know, that stood out to us, and you know, we provide lots of opportunities for those kinds of interactions with other adults who can come alongside of our children,
Right.
and be that neat, amazing adult who can really speak into their life in special ways. And one example of that is I have a friend who comes every Thursday, and we garden together. That's a common interest that we share. But she also just really saw that I was going through a challenging time emotionally in my life, and just really felt like she wanted to come alongside of me as an older person and encourage me. And that has blossomed into a lovely friendship. And also, she happens to volunteer for one of the gardening projects through a group called Gateway Greening. And what they do is they garden in green spaces in urban areas in order to provide food in what are typically food deserts in many cities. And so our 15-year-old has been going with her and volunteering and helping grow food for one of the poorest communities in St. Louis. And so they've had really deep, enriching conversations, and that's just been such a lovely thing. And so again, an opportunity for a relationship with someone who is not her age, who can really provide mentoring and wisdom, so we get the same benefit of having an interesting person who can teach, but it's just not in a classroom setting.
Right.
So.
And this is another one of those benefits of not having your children locked up in a building all week, where it's amazing when we have our children have friends who are in government school and they just don't have time.
No.
We're like, hey, do you want to do this cool thing? Sorry,
I've got homework.
Yeah, I'm in school. Got homework. I got 5 sports I'm doing, They're just like really scheduled up at incredibly early ages. Yeah. And it seems to result in not having a chance to have some of the multi-generational relationships. Mm-hmm. They're real tied to their peer group. That's by design, if you know the origins of the Prussian school system. Mm-hmm. They're really tied to their peer group. They're not having the vertical relationships with children younger than them and adults older than them. And as we already emphasized, they're not having the time to go deep on something that they care about.
And I will say, we have 3 teenagers. I'm not really experiencing a lot of the kind of teenagery things that, people are like, oh, just wait till your kids are teenagers, then they're going to be horrible. And I'm like, I'm still waiting. I mean, I like them. Right. I think they're interesting people. I have spent a lot of time and effort in maintaining relationships with them, and I'm seeing the results of that. Right. I think so.
Okay, well, I think we're done. We've hit all the super chats, and
there's so many lovely comments. I went back and read every single one, which Stephen was surprised about, but I did. I really appreciated just your engagement in what for me has really, it's my life work. Yeah. This is my life's work, is these human beings, schooling them and seeing them grow into intelligent adults, engaged in their world, confident about their gifts. It's amazing. It's awesome.
Speaking of firewalls, I keep my wife a little bit firewalled from internet culture because, let's be frank, some of it's pretty not in good taste. But through reading the comments, she got introduced to the term like trad wife.
I had never heard that term.
She had never even heard.
I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So she's like, is this a compliment? What are they saying about me?
I mean, maybe it's not a compliment.
No, I think
that's
it is.
Fine.
In these circles, it is. But anyway, I just thought it would be fun for you all to hear that she learned the term trad wife, and it seems like she's embracing this as part of her identity.
And I wouldn't say you keep me from it. I don't really have an interest in getting heavily engaged in internet culture. That's just not where my interests lie.
Right.
I'd rather be outside digging in the dirt.
Right.
Gardening, playing with my kids. I don't know. So
every message, laugh out loud, clap if you've read this message. I don't understand. Okay. Anyway.
Did I use the wrong language? Every message?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's
something else. See, I don't know. I haven't.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us. And I already saw some comments that I'm sure Heather will read as she reads through back later, encouraging us to cover various topics in future streams. And these have been going well, so there hopefully will be future ones. So thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.